discussing what we're going to discuss.
We're just discussing our lack of preparation. So what we're going to discuss today is, as we wrote in the description there, it's kind of like, when do you do keyword planning? This is something that we get asked by clients from time to time. Can you, when it comes to planning content, for us, usually blog posts, but if it's a landing page or whatever, do you really need to pick your keyword, what you're going to optimize for ahead of time and write? Or can you take existing pieces of content that you've written in the past and kind of go back and say, all right, well, what keyword in this content can we optimize for? And then, magic, it'll
Keyword
rank.
retrofitting.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. So can you retrofit a keyword? I don't know, like, I can answer this in like a word. Should I answer it in a word and like not bury the lead, or should we really be dramatic about this? Like,
Answer in a word.
well, so I guess no is the word. Can you retrofit a keyword to a blog post? I'm going to get myself in a little trouble by being maybe this absolute, but no, you can't do that. Somebody might prove me wrong every now and then. But by and large, you're going to find that if you try to do that, it doesn't work.
Why not?
Why not? So I'm trying to think of the easiest way to kind of like work into the topic, but since I haven't really like prepared anything, I guess I'll just dive on in.
Yeah, like use one of your old dead tech posts or something, and think about like how you would retrofit it for a keyword. Can you do that?
The thing that I think people often don't understand is that, like, so the idea of retrofitting a keyword onto a piece of content that you've written is kind of fundamentally flawed, and it belies this impression of SEO that, like, a lot of people in the software industry, for instance, are like super skeptical. They think of SEO as this way that you like hack and trick search engines to post garbage content.
Yeah.
And viewed through that lens, the answer to this would be yes. Like, you can take some piece of content that you had written and then sprinkle the magic awful SEO juice on it and force it on people.
Mm-hmm.
But the search engines don't work that way anymore, because the way that modern search engine optimization works, modern search works, is that the search engines are really good at figuring out when somebody types something into Google, they're really good at figuring out whether that person likes the result. So if you type into Google, like, what's the best fitness tracker on the market or something, and there is a result that evaluates like a bunch of fitness trackers, you're probably going to click on that and be interested, and it's comparing their prices and all that good stuff. You're going to spend a lot of time on that page. You might even read all of that and then close and stop searching. Those are what are called search signals. And that's telling the search engine that this is a good piece of content. People who search best fitness tracker read your article, and they don't search anymore because they're good. They found what they're looking for. On the flip side, if you were to post something kind of irrelevant and maybe the search engine started to rank it, it would find that people would click on that and then immediately hit the back button and keep searching. And the search engines can also tell that they're doing that.
What about if I'm the company Fitbit and I decide to answer like what's the best fitness tracker, and I write an article about my Fitbit products?
That would probably rank.
Okay.
That's kind of a nuanced concern. If your readers might be a little skeptical, but it's relevant content. So if you're shilling for your own company under the pretense, I guess, of putting out an objective article, it really kind of depends how you do it. You could get dinged if people click on it and then they say, oh, I see what you're doing here.
Yeah.
You're just writing this puff piece to sell your product. Then they might hit back. Like, that might negatively impact it, but it might also not, because sometimes landing pages will show up. That's sort of a maybe tangential concern.
Well, I guess I was mapping this to, like, let's say you're a developer and you're selling, you've made some kind of like, some kind of web app or something like that, and you want to sell it, and you're like, you'd written something about how this was the best web app ever, it was incredible, and then you started looking at it and you're like, how could I get more eyes on the page? How could I retrofit a keyword into this? And you said, like, well, what's the best web app for X, so that's kind of what I was thinking along that line of questioning.
Let me provide some context because yeah, that makes sense. So the reason I was talking about the way search engines work is that when you think about what readers are doing or searchers are doing is they're asking a question. If they type best fitness tracker into Google, they're saying like, what is the best fitness tracker, or what are some fitness trackers that I could compare? They're always asking questions. And so when you do keyword research and when you plan content based on what people are searching for in Google, you want to rank. What you're really doing is you're figuring out what questions people are asking, and then you're answering those questions.
Mm-hmm.
So a good search engine strategy, basically, you figure out what's relevant to your offering. In the example you're mentioning, web development, whatever app it is, you figure out what people who would be interested in that, what questions are those people asking, and you start answering those questions. You start helping them. Like in 2020, Well Done SEO is legitimately about helping people. Now, to use that example, if you've written a piece of content about how great your whatever is, and then you say, oh, I would really like people to arrive here via the search engines. So what magic dust can I sprinkle on this article? What keyword can I optimize for? When you think of it that way, you're not going to have a lot of luck because what you're not doing is answering a question anyone's asking. Nobody's asking like, can you give me a list of reasons that, Bill's magic app is the best? That's not how people approach search engines.
Yeah.
It's how you want them to approach search engines. But if you have that content, you're answering a question that literally nobody's asking. So there's nothing you can do to that content kind of as is to alter that fundamental fact. So in the past, what you could have done 15 years ago is simple like hacks, like keyword stuffing. You would go in and, if it was like an app for like tracking expenses, maybe you'd go in and write the word expenses over and over again and be like, hey, I retrofitted this keyword to get people here. But that just won't work anymore. So the trouble that you'll have is that you have this content that you've created because it's what you want to say to the world, not what anyone's asking. And you would be surprised how infrequently those two things overlap. I think it applies well to like imagine if you started writing a blog. And I've gone through this. Like I wrote a blog, I built a following. There were a lot of people who enjoyed my thoughts and would read what I produced each week. But when I started to look at like traffic that came in through Google, people that would find me via the search engine, it was mostly coincidental. Like it was random articles that I'd written that started to do well because there was no planning, but very few of them would do well in search. And if I were to then go back through my blog and say, well, okay, I wrote this blog post that was really popular. What are some of them? So like a common thing I used to do was make up terms on my blog, like expert, beginner, and these other terms. So I would literally like write a blog post where I made up some term that didn't exist. Nobody's searching for that. It's not like a word. It's not a thing. So you can't really easily, although some of them got popular enough that people do now search for them, but you can't go back and say like, all right, what kind of tweaks could I do to this post? I wrote about a thing that doesn't exist to get people to ask about it like it's nonsense. So
I think like you were it's funny because like you didn't know this at the time, but you were writing stuff that was shareable, and that was the way that you were getting out there. You weren't really going for SEO at all. You were going for
I've never really gone for SEO with Dead Tech much. I mean, maybe here and there, kind of when we started Hit Subscribe, I wrote some articles that I knew might rank for a keyword just to see if I could do it, and I did. But that was really never the point because the blog was always about things that interested me. And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. So if you're out there and you're writing a hobby blog or even like a blog for your organization and your goal isn't to bring in traffic through search engines, write about whatever you want. The fact that it's not optimized for a keyword, the fact that you're not answering people's questions that they ask on the internet doesn't mean that it isn't good content. It doesn't mean that you won't get readers. It just means that you're not going to get readers through search engines. People approach search engines in sort of specific ways. They're generally looking to gather information or solve a problem, something along those lines. So your content has to help them do that. If your content isn't helping them do that, it's just not going to rank. So if you write your hot take on the best whatever coming up in 2020. Nobody is searching for your hot take. People aren't out there saying, hey, I wonder what Joe or Jane Q blogger thinks about X. And even if they were, they would just go to your site and look it up. They wouldn't search through Google. So I guess maybe with the time remaining, it's worth talking too about, because you might be watching this and thinking, well, I don't know about all this because like I have a blog and I do have these posts that I didn't write with any search terms in mind that bring in organic traffic. That does happen. I mean, it happened to me. That's coincidental. So it's possible that you're writing an article that, unbeknownst to you, is answering searchers' questions out there without you really even meaning for it to. And that can happen in a few different ways. Like a good example of this, of like pure coincidences, I wrote this snarky article, I don't know, 9 years ago, that was mainly kind of a hit piece on how hard it was to get going with web development in Java. So I wrote this post that was titled something like Java versus .NET, like a comparison of two frameworks. And that, I think, to this day gets a lot of traffic. Now, it's probably not the best qualified traffic because those people are probably looking for an earnest comparison of the frameworks. And what I did was basically, I wrote one getting started procedure, which was like 800 steps, and the other one was like 2. And that was my point. Like, hey, Java, make it easier to get started.
That's funny.
So the fact that that brought in organic traffic was an accident. The traffic probably doesn't love me. Like a lot of them probably bounce, like I was talking about earlier, because they're like, oh, screw this guy. Like, this isn't helpful to me. But that's because I didn't write it with that purpose. So you will every now and then blunder into an article that brings in organic traffic if you happen to title it right. Yeah.
Is there a way to go back on your old posts and see what, if you have a post that seems to be really getting a lot of traffic and like after a couple months, you want to see what keywords people are typing in to get there. And if you find that there's one keyword that like just everybody's getting there by, can you retrofit for that keyword? Because it sounds like it's doing well in search for that keyword. So why not make it do even better by slipping it into a subhead or something like that?
Well, what you would probably do, so if you've written a post and it's doing well for a term, that means that whether you meant to or not, you're answering the reader's question. So in that case, retrofitting for it isn't exactly what I would consider. Like when people ask us this, it's like, hey, this post isn't getting any organic traffic, it's not ranking. Can we somehow do SEO magic and bang, it'll rank? And the answer to that is no. If you've written a post that, whether you intended it or not, is actually ranking, then you're more tweaking than retrofitting. You're going to go in and say, okay, I see. So like, here's an example. I mean, it's kind of an extreme one. Google and the search engines in general have indexed my Java versus .NET, my snarky post. They've indexed it. It ranks. So if I really wanted to rank better, bring in more traffic, I could go and kind of blow away that whole post and write a different version of it that was actually a comparison of the frameworks, like a meaningful comparison. And then I would do better. But that's not so much retrofitting as it's overhauling the article. And I think what it all kind of rolls up to is if you wrote a blog post where you weren't really trying to answer a reader question or a searcher question, the odds that you're actually very specifically answering that question is pretty low. It might happen in a definition post if you decide that you're going to write a post of like, what is this new data ops trend? So you write a post called "What is data ops?" People are searching for what is data ops. Like you might blunder into that, but it's pretty rare. So it wouldn't really be retrofitting. It would be like overhauling the post.
Yeah, you can't retrofit your original intent for the post, so you can't retrofit for a keyword.
And I mean, another way to think of this too is if you write a blog post, your natural inclination when writing blog posts, unless you make it a specific point to learn how to write for the purposes of a search engine, you are writing blog posts that you're going to try to be original. You're going to try to write about topics that nobody's ever written about before. You're going to be anxious to share your opinions. All of these are things that are terrible for search. By definition, people aren't asking for original things, but you're going to mimic, like news pieces, op-eds, periodicals, where they're really going for a reader subscription model, and they're doing that by coming up with new, original, thoughtful content. writing a post about how to do this thing that thousands of people are searching for how to do, that's not the same thing that causes something to go viral typically. So the way that most people, when just writing off the cuff, think to write is almost the opposite of the way that you want to write for search engines.
Yeah, like you want to compete with stuff that's already there. You just need to be the best.
Yeah, the competition thing is big. So a lot of people, when we kind of introduce them to this concept of writing for the sake of a search engine, they'll say like, well, I don't want to write about, the best JavaScript frameworks because people have already written about that. And if you're writing for the purposes of search engines, there's almost nothing you'll ever write that people haven't written about before. Mm-hmm. And if you do happen to get there first, 8 other people are going to do it at the same time, and nobody in 6 months will know who did it first. So when you're writing for search engines, you're trying to do it better, not first or only. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, hopefully that kind of clarifies the point. If you have a blog and you're thinking, oh, I can just go back to my old posts and do some SEO stuff and magically I'll get traffic, no, it's not going to work that way. The only way that might happen is if you dramatically overhauled content, and in that case, you kind of might as well just write new content that is trying to help these searchers from the get-go.
Like it.
Yeah, all right. Tune in next week. Will we be... Oh, next week might be interesting.
I have an idea for next week, but I don't want to talk about it right now.
We are going to be in different locales next week.
We are.
I am going to be here by myself.
I'm going to be with Angela.
I was going to make a crack about how I'm going to be, having like a wild bachelor time, but like I'm going to be probably working a lot.
Yep.
It is not going to be wild.
A real party animal you are.
Yeah, I might haul another monitor in here to go along with the 3 that I have.
Please don't. All right.
Well, that's probably enough of that. Thank you for tuning in. We'll catch you next time.
Bye.